And I wanted to say to whoever has her or knows where she is that it's never too late. And you're not lost or alone. And it is never too late to do the right thing.
A direct and deeply emotional message to the kidnapper of her mom. Savannah Guthrie releasing a heartbreaking new video. It is now day 16 in the desperate search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. No arrest, no clear suspect, and swirling, conflicting reports about what may have motivated her abduction from her home on February 1st. And we just got new information in about the clothing that armed, masked person was wearing on Nancy Guthrie's door. And this new information could be huge in solving this case. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey guys, real quick before we start this episode of On the Case, one of the most watched shows on YouTube, I want to talk about our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest personal injury law firm. They're a firm with more than 1,000 attorneys who have recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. And in the past few months alone, a client in Florida received $12 million when insurance offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million. That's 40 times the insurer's offer. Morgan & Morgan makes it easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you're injured, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/OTC. You can click the link below or scan the QR code on your screen. From the very beginning, one question has loomed over this case. Who took Nancy Guthrie? And more specifically, who would abduct an 84-year-old woman battling serious health issues, a woman who depends on daily medication to survive? I want to show you what the Pima County Sheriff's Department just posted Monday afternoon. We don't have suspects in this case, but now for the first time, the sheriff is ruling people out. The sheriff writes, quote, "To be clear, the Guthrie family, to include all siblings and spouses, has been cleared as possible suspects in this case. The family has been nothing but cooperative and gracious and are victims in this case." The sheriff, Chris Nanos, goes on to say, quote, "To suggest otherwise is not only wrong, it's cruel. The Guthrie family are victims, plain and simple. Please, I'm begging you, the media, to honor your profession and report with some sense of compassion and professionalism." Early on in this investigation, there were reports that Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law may be a prime suspect in this case because it was believed that he is the last person to see Nancy Guthrie before she was taken from her home. It's been reported that he was the one who drove Nancy Guthrie back to her house. Now, previously, the sheriff said that no one would be cleared until an arrest had been made in this case. It's unclear what changed that and what prompted him to make this statement now. There are several theories that have been speculated online, and one of them is that whoever took Nancy, that wasn't the intent when they entered her home, that the intent was actually to burglarize it, to steal stuff. Then something happened, and they were forced to take Nancy Guthrie. Now, law enforcement, they have not come out and officially shared what they think the intent was of the person or people who took Nancy Guthrie, and it's unclear if they even know that at this point, at least from what they're saying to us officially. Now, there is a media report, though, that's getting a lot of attention, and it's getting pushback from law enforcement, and it claims that Nancy Guthrie is the victim of what was supposed to be a burglary at her home. We will dive into that new report in just a moment, but before we do that, I want to talk about what Savannah Guthrie posted on her Instagram Sunday night. It is a new video. It is raw, it is emotional, and much of her message is to her mom's kidnapper.
I wanted to come on and it's been 2 weeks since our mom was taken, and I just wanted to come on and say that we still have hope and we still believe. And I wanted to say to whoever has her or knows where she is that it's never too late. And you're not lost or alone. And it is never too late to do the right thing. And we are here. And we believe. And we believe in the essential goodness of every human being. And it's never too late.
And you just can see, you don't have to be a body language expert to see this, but just how exhausted, drained, and emotional Savannah Guthrie looks. And it is understandable when you think of what her family is going through right now. It is clear that this family continues to hold on to hope that Nancy will come home. This newest message, it seems raw, it seems unscripted, and it's certainly a different tone from her last video that you might remember. It came in around the time of a deadline that was included in an alleged ransom note sent to media outlets like TMZ. This was it.
Hi there, everybody. I wanted to come on and just share a few thoughts as we enter into another week of this nightmare. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for all of the prayers and the love that we have felt, my sister and brother and I, and that our mom has felt. Because we believe that somehow, some way, she is feeling these prayers and that God is lifting her even in this moment and in this darkest place. We believe our mom is still out there. We need your help. Law enforcement is working tirelessly around the clock trying to bring her home, trying to find her. She was taken and we don't know where. And we need your help. So I'm coming on just to ask you, not just for your prayers, but no matter where you are, even if you're far from Tucson, if you see anything, if you hear anything, if there's anything at all that seems strange to you, that you report to law enforcement. We are at an hour of desperation, and we need your help.
For as public as this case has been, it is unclear what the Guthrie family knows and if they know of any possible leads that law enforcement is following. And it's also unclear what investigators closest to this case are following right now. Of course, we've heard from the sheriff, but other than that, there's still a lot that we don't know when it comes to the inner circle of this investigation. But we are learning about a potential clue that has to do with the person seen wearing a mask, a jacket, gloves, and a backpack on Nancy Guthrie's front steps around the time she vanished. The Pima County Sheriff says the clothing that you see on the person in that video, they believe that it was possibly bought at Walmart. Now, these clothes are not exclusively available at Walmart. They're calling this a possibility. But when you say Walmart, you add that clothing to the backpack that the FBI says is one exclusively sold at Walmart, a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack backpack. And again, the only place you can get it is Walmart. Then you have Fox News that came out with a report saying that the holster that you see on the man's waist, that appears to be a holster. It goes for $10, so it's pretty cheap, and it's sold at some Walmarts, and they found it in stock at 5 Walmarts in the Tucson area. So we'll see how that factors into trying to identify if the person we see in that video, did they buy these clothes and that backpack relatively recently, and that can help them track down who that person is. Now, let's get to this new report that came in that is getting a lot of attention. It's from the CBS affiliate in Phoenix a reporter, Brianna Whitney, who is a true crime reporter there. She hosts a series called True Crime Arizona. She put out a story saying that she has an inside source telling her that law enforcement believe that Nancy Guthrie is the victim of a burglary gone wrong. And the intent of the person or people who went into her home, it wasn't to take Nancy Guthrie, it was to steal things, but something must have happened inside of the house that made her the victim of a botched burglary. This would be instead of a plan for them to show up and kidnap Nancy Guthrie all along. Now, that report, it's being disputed today by the Pima County Sheriff to an extent. This is what the sheriff told us. PCSD, Pima County Sheriff's Department, has never stated that this was a burglary gone wrong. Any reports indicating otherwise are inaccurate. This remains a very active investigation. Now, look, if you want to read into that statement a little bit more, it is pushing back on the report, and it's pushing back on the department ever stating that this was a burglary gone wrong, and to suggest that, they say, would be inaccurate, opposed to them saying the story itself is incorrect. Now, the FBI also spoke to Fox News, who reached out for comment, and the FBI said that they don't know where that story came from. So it appears the Bureau is also pushing back a bit as well. Now, some experts have suggested what that local news report out of Arizona is claiming, that whoever entered Nancy's home, they didn't intend to take her, but something must have happened inside, and it resorted to that. Some of the reasons they point to that, well, you think of the images like this one. This one was put out by TMZ. This is of a suspicious person caught on camera in the weeks surrounding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. And there have been several of these that have been posted on social media, and many of them have nothing to do with the Guthrie case. In this one, we see a man on January 23rd walking backwards intentionally on the front steps of a house 6.5 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. TMZ blurred the man's face, but they say that he has facial hair, and it's similar to the man you see in the surveillance video that was released by the FBI from Nancy Guthrie's house. Now, TMZ says that the FBI is following this as a lead, but it's unclear, again, if it has anything to do with the Guthrie case. This video was taken out around 5 o'clock in the morning, and then apparently a dog barks, and the man takes off running. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is that Nancy Guthrie, based off the timeline given to us, around 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:30, her pacemaker disconnects from her iPhone. So this apparently happened in the early hours of the morning. And we're just seeing videos where you see other examples of people showing up on the doorsteps of folks in Tucson, Arizona in the early hours of the morning. Now, on top of that, we've had experts talk to us about how when it comes to kidnappings, an 84-year-old woman with health issues needing medication daily is just a very vulnerable target that kidnappers often do not target for ransom. So that could potentially lead you in the direction of the speculation that this was a burglary gone wrong. But on the other hand, we have talked to law enforcement experts who say it's very rare for a home burglary to happen in the middle of the night because that's when people are home and they're sleeping. And if you were to go into somebody's house and you want to take stuff, having a confrontation with a person who may wake up is the last thing you want in that situation. It's typically commercial buildings that become targets at night of burglars. And when you look at the suspicious person on Nancy Guthrie's front steps, it does appear that backpack is full as they approach the door, which is another thing that you would not expect from someone who is planning to take items from a home. But again, that CBS affiliate in Phoenix says their inside sources are telling them that this was a burglary that went very wrong. And then you have the Pima County Sheriff pushing back on that report. So let's talk a little bit more about the evidence that we know about in this case. We just talked about that information coming in about Walmart and where the clothes potentially could have been bought that we see on that person on Nancy Guthrie's front steps. We're also still waiting for this DNA to come back related to a glove that was found about 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. The FBI sent us a statement that says the glove that was found, it was found in a field on the side of a road. The agents say as they searched the miles surrounding Nancy's home, they found 16 gloves. I did find it interesting that they said that the majority of the gloves were from searchers who had just thrown them on the ground. But then there's one glove they found that seems to be offering at least a glimmer of hope in this case. That glove, quote, this is from the FBI, appears to match the gloves of the subject in the surveillance video. Now, when you hear that line, it certainly grabs your attention. The FBI says the Pima County Sheriff's Department sent the glove to a private lab that it uses in Florida. It was sent on Thursday last week. It was tested on Friday last week. Then preliminary results came back on Saturday, and now the FBI is waiting for quality control and official confirmation. And when that comes back, the FBI says it will then put the DNA profile into CODIS, which is their national DNA database. And if the DNA is of a person who's had any sort of previous run-in with the law, it should have a match. That database is full of people who have been convicted of crimes, arrested, or detained. Now, the FBI has not gone into more detail on whether there's anything specific that brings that glove to Nancy Guthrie's home beyond the fact that it looks like the one worn in the video by that masked, armed individual. And we should be clear that it is possible that the glove was just the result of someone glittering. And also beyond that, even if there's a match in CODIS, it was brought up that, well, that could just mean that there was someone with a criminal record who was roughly 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home at some point. It may not be connected to this case, but you have to admit it's a clue that could mean something in this investigation now as we enter week 3. It does appear this glove is a commonly used nitrile glove that's then put over another glove. When you look at that video, we have not heard from the FBI whether they found Nancy Guthrie's DNA on the glove. Now, we do know that investigators found DNA other than Nancy's, her family, or people close to her at her house, but it's unclear who that belongs to. It's also unclear if it is someone who entered her home with bad intentions, or maybe it's someone who was at her house to help. Maybe it was hired help like a gardener or a pool person who reportedly submitted DNA samples. Now, the sheriff has not unveiled what evidence they found inside Nancy Guthrie's home. We do know that there was blood on the front steps, and that blood came back to match Nancy Guthrie, as we see it here in this video from News Nation. The sheriff has also said that law enforcement don't have suspects in this case, but he did have an interesting line that I think we need to talk about, that he said after the raid of a home about 2 miles from Nancy's house on Friday night, there was also that dramatic traffic stop. There was a man who was detained and released, and the sheriff told media outlets that the person pulled over in a traffic stop at a Culver's was a person of interest in this case. He first said it to Fox News, but that person has been released. Now, the CBS affiliate in Phoenix is reporting that DNA is being tested from that vehicle. Now, that raid moved quickly on Friday night. We saw a SWAT team move in. There was a federal search warrant of the home, which was in an upscale neighborhood a couple miles from Nancy Guthrie's house. NBC News, though, is reporting that authorities are leaning away from anyone who has been detained at this point as potential suspects.
I just wanted to come on and say that we still have hope, and we still believe.
Now, it does appear in Savannah's new video that she is holding on to hope that her mom is still out there, and this story could finally have a happy ending after such a nightmare. The sheriff told the New York Times that the investigation will continue no matter what. And he said this, and this was the line that did get a bit of attention over the weekend when it comes to bringing this case to an end. Quote, maybe it's an hour from now, maybe it's weeks or months or years from now, but we won't quit. We're going to find Nancy. We're going to find this guy. That's Sheriff Chris Nanos to the New York Times. Now, another development that happened today that I think we should talk about, TMZ continues to say that they're receiving emails from someone who claims to know where Nancy Guthrie is and who took her. Now, it is unclear if these emails are real, but Harvey Levin from TMZ said today they received a new letter from this person who's been demanding payment to provide information. This person has emailed 3 times, initially asking for 1 Bitcoin for the information they say they have, according to TMZ. Today's letter reportedly said, quote, I know what I saw 5 days ago south of the border, and I was told to shut up. So I know who he is, and that was definitely Nancy with them, end quote. Now, the person sending these emails, they appear to be different from whoever was behind those 2 alleged ransom notes that TMZ and local television stations in Tucson received, demanding Bitcoin with 2 deadlines that have since passed. It's unclear how serious the FBI is taking this person who's continuing to email TMZ. Now, the FBI is offering $100,000 for information that leads to Nancy Guthrie or the person or people who took her from her home on February 1st. If you have information on Nancy Guthrie, you can contact the Pima County Sheriff at 520-351-4900. You can also contact the FBI. Their number is 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to tips.fbi.gov. Join us now to talk more about this case. Retired FBI Special Agent Greg Rogers, thank you for being with us here on Law and Crime. This debate today, after this report came out of Arizona by a television station, that they have a source saying that the theory is that this was a botched burglary and Nancy Guthrie was not initially a target. The sheriff and the FBI, they seem to be pushing back on that a little bit. What do you make based off what we know at this point about what potentially happened here?
I sort of discredit the botched burglary theory myself for reasons being that when you it was even though I think it's obvious from the video cam that the individual that approached the front door made numerous mistakes, had really poor preoperative planning, but your average, a burglary is kicking in a door, stealing. What is it they were going to take? I mean, does the individual that's giving that tip saying that they believe there was something really valuable in the Guthrie home? That's just a strange neighborhood to do like a burglary. They weren't going to just go in there and steal TVs and things like that. So I really doubt that. I don't think that's a viable theory. And burglars don't traditionally kidnap the people who are in the residence. I mean, they tragically, and I don't mean to sound cynical, but most burglars are just going to incapacitate the person that's in the residence. They're going to harm them, leave them there. I mean, they don't have any interest in taking a person with them. They've got something they want to steal. They steal it and they leave.
Yeah, and I know this television station, they just put out a statement saying they stand by their reporting. So we'll see. It's one of those things, like, we'll see when this all shakes out,
right,
like what actually it is, and we can only know so much from the outside. We've had experts who have said, and people may not realize this, that a home burglary typically doesn't happen at night because people are at home and they're
right,
sleeping. And the last thing you want, if you want to steal stuff, is to have a confrontation with the person in a home.
exactly.
Where you see some of the commercial buildings are targets. But when I hear that, I also wonder, especially because we've heard, and even, in talking now, like, this guy made a lot of mistakes when he showed up at the door. Like, he didn't look like he was this sophisticated criminal mastermind, at least on the surface. Like, how often do people like that know that, though, and think that through and be like, well, there's probably someone in the house sleeping?
Unfortunately, there are professionals that that's what they do. They go
Right.
from city to city, they burglarize, and then they move on, and they're actually very good at what they do. And it's all just a bet. But I mean, the bet is, it's pretty obvious. The chances of someone being home at that hour are pretty good. If you just do a little bit of surveillance, you would know when she wasn't there. I mean, it'd be easy to watch her drive away, and then you just go in and take whatever it is you're going to take. There weren't a lot of things taken from the residence, it's my understanding. So it's unless there was something that no one knows about, some real valuable item that maybe she had, or a safe or something like that, and that was all they took, that'd be one thing. But it's the home wasn't burglarized in any sort of traditional burglary fashion. There were a lot of very valuable items still there. And they were there. These guys were in that residence for 40 some minutes.
Right.
I mean, so they were there a long time. They could have cleaned house if they wanted to, if that was the intent.
Right. You have the timeline where I think it's a little after 1:00 in the morning, 1:30, where the doorbell camera disconnects. And then at 40 minutes later or so, her pacemaker disconnects from the iPhone. The other piece of new news coming in, because we knew that the backpack was one that is exclusively sold at Walmart.
Right.
The type that he has. It's the only place you can get it. But now the sheriff says the clothing that this person was wearing, and I wonder if this includes the mask as well. If that's like not just a beanie that you cut holes in, but it's an actual, you wonder how many people in Tucson, Arizona are buying those with, how the weather is. It's not like he's in, Denver or something like that, but the fact that it's a possibility that these are all Walmart items, what could that mean to this investigation?
Oh, that's huge. That's we have solved a number of cases. The most um, important one that I can recall, we solved a serial killer murder case, Joseph Duncan in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. He'd killed a family and killed a number of children on a countrywide spree. And it was because um, he left some items at one of the residences where the UPC numbers were tracked back to a Home Depot. And then once you figure out which location they used, there's video cams. You've got, you're running receipts, seeing if they used a credit card. You can literally track who purchased that specific item. The inventory systems at Walmart's and Home Depots, those sorts of things are very, very detailed. So you can track it right down um, to who purchased it. And if they didn't use a card, if they were being careful and they were, trying to be careful and they were using cash, you can still detail exactly when that item was sold, and you can look at the video cams. And we've solved a number of cases that way. That's a very, very important finding. I'm hopeful that that's going to be really helpful.
Yeah, me too. And I'm because I know when the backpack story came out, you look at that and you're like, well, when was that backpack purchased? Like, how likely is it that, it could be a backpack that was bought years ago? I don't know how long it's only
Right.
been available at Walmart, but then it's like the clothes as well. And it's like, if that all lines up, that this one person bought these clothes, like that could be huge to this
Yeah.
case. I know yesterday, another kind of big clue that came out, or at least it seems like that on the surface to us on the outside, is this glove. And
Right.
they found a glove about 2 miles from the house. They say, and the line that gets everybody's attention is that it appears to be the glove that matches what we see in the person on the front steps. Now, does that just mean it's like a kind of like a latex style glove? I mean, anybody could have those, but based off what we know about it, the DNA testing, what can we expect if that comes back as a profile that they can put into CODIS, that database?
Oh, that may be the biggest lead we have right now. If that's actually the glove, um, I can assure you people are working 24/7. They've identified the DNA already. And so they'll run that through CODIS. Unfortunately, what most people don't realize is unless you have a criminal history, or if you've been in the military, or if you've been a federal agent, your DNA is available because you've been tested. But it's um, the vast majority of the American public hasn't been. So they'll be running, if he's not in CODIS, they're going to be running that through historical databases. We just, another case that was just solved that way was the Kohlberger case in
Yeah.
Idaho, where he killed those kids at the university in Moscow. And that case was made by DNA. He left a knife sheath in that had his father's DNA on it. That was tracked through a historical database, and then of course we find out that Brian Kohlberger is a student, at a university 10 miles away. So it's cases are solved that way. So I'm really hoping that those were the actual gloves.
Mm-hmm.
We'll find out. But again, that goes to show, you can make so many determinations based on the sophistication and the talent of the individual, whoever your subject is, um, based on their pre-operation and post-operation planning. And his pre-operation planning was terrible. He wears a backpack with reflective gear all over it. He doesn't come with anything to defeat the ring camera, even though he's got a backpack on. He could have had duct tape or spray paint. He could have defeated that camera in a second. Instead, he grabs a bush, which is
It was
shows a
bizarre.
real deficit of pre-planning. But post-op planning, to throw your gloves, which I've seen things like that in a number of cases, but why are you going to do that? Why are you going to, it again, it makes you think about the intellect of the individual you're working, because you could take those gloves with you to a dumpster, 100 miles away, or you could burn them. You could, but just to throw them and leave them somewhere again really makes you wonder about how savvy the person is that you're working.
Yeah, and just on that, like, and if those are the gloves, and it's like after all of this, like that's what they would do. It almost makes me like wonder if that's actually how it's going to be, because it almost just seems like, for as unintelligent they may appear on camera, like to just ditch your gloves about 2 miles
Yeah,
from Nancy Guthrie's home. It's like
you
we'll
can't
see if
explain that.
can't
Yeah,
explain it. If
no,
if that's actually what happens, and we'll see. Even with that though, because you do look at the camera. I also think of like his ski mask, and it's
hmm
like a burglar in a comedy movie would wear that ski mask. I mean, it shows a
right,
pretty good amount of his face, as opposed to like some of the other options out there that will cover your mouth and the eyes will
right.
not be as it was just as if it was like, why would you, and I hope it helps lead to him. I'm happy he did, but it just seems like a very dumb mask to wear if you were going to go inside, someone's home. With that, knowing it's been, we're now entering the third week of this, with all the mistakes that you see on camera. Are you surprised that this case isn't solved yet?
Yes, yeah, I really am. And again, not wanting to sound cynical, but time is just so much of the essence.
Yeah.
Considering her health and other issues, but I think during the first week, I sort of was of the opinion that they're just being very careful because there's these ransom letters. They're doing everything they can do to verify the, um, authenticity of those, or if they're dealing with a real person. But the fact that there doesn't seem to have been any real solid verification of proof of life. There's not photos. They're not dealing personally with a um, kidnapper. That's very, very concerning. And I think it's telling also in the way that the family now, in the videos that they're
Hmm.
putting out. And I can assure you, those aren't done without a whole lot of planning and talking to profilers and other things about what should be said in these videos. They've gone from talking directly to a kidnapper to talking to the public, and
Yeah,
those
because
are
that's
those are radically different things.
because we've seen, and I was saying beforehand, like, you don't have to be an expert in body language to just know what Savannah got. No one knows what she's going through, but to understand how distraught she is, like, that is incredibly real, and
Right.
it's a nightmare that nobody would want to go through. But when you look at the messaging, where it was the family together really trying to humanize her, the first
Yeah.
couple of videos she posted. Then you had the one around the deadline related to that alleged ransom note, where it was more this call out to the public and
Right.
saying, if you see something, say something. And it was almost, the tone there was more of like the Savannah Guthrie from the Today Show that we all know. But then this one last night, where she's saying you can do the right thing. Like, she is speaking to someone, either the person who, you know, kidnapped her mom, or someone who knows who did it, whoever it may be, like behind the scenes. For as authentic as videos like that look, like, what is the advice that the FBI can give a family member in that type of situation?
We have very talented psychological profilers that are working on this case. They're there, and those messages are specifically directed, um, and the language in them that is used is very well thought out. I mean, those messages just aren't those aren't off the cuff. There's reasoning behind each one. I wouldn't I wouldn't be surprised if this one had a little bit to do with the individual that keeps sending messages and email, to media
Right.
outlets saying he knows who did it. Um, I'm um, I'm very suspicious of that, because that individual has had numerous occasions to really prove his veracity and hasn't done so. And by that, I mean every time that the Bureau and the Pima County Sheriff's Office has detained anyone for questioning, that person could easily step up and say, "That's not him. You
Right.
got the wrong person."
Definitely.
You'd be knocking it out of the park. You would be really proving your veracity, and because you're saying you know who it is, but that's not happening. So, um, yeah,
I know in the most recent, because TMZ today said they got another, I think it's the fourth message now from this person. And it's
right,
very different the way that person, excuse me, it's very different how that person is acting. The fourth email they get today from someone saying it's not that they kidnapped Nancy Guthrie, but they know.
right,
And there's part of it you look at and you think that this might, it's just a very different approach compared to the initial email, which was, I want the money. And then there's no response whatsoever. But in
right,
these emails, it just got me thinking, they talked about over the border and talking about Mexico. And in a past job, I drove through Nogales, like that entryway just south of Tucson. And like
right,
anybody who's ever driven across the border, like it's a lot easier to go into Mexico than the process of answering questions,
right.
on your way back. It's just, they're not checking vehicles. They're kind of just
No,
waving you over. It's like going through a toll.
right.
How likely is it that the FBI is working with Mexican authorities just to keep tabs on whether anything is popping up that someone, especially after this video was put out of the person on the front steps, may have booked it across the border in hopes that that could cover their tracks a little bit better?
Right. No, I can assure you that the federales, the Mexican federal police, our counterparts, um, have been involved in this case from the get go. I mean, literally from the very beginning, because just because of the proximity, how close Tucson is to the border. And again, as you've said, it's very easy to drive into Nogales. That's not, but there are cameras, and there are so, plus, um, I can assure you from working years of cartel cases, the Mexican federal police have um, very close contact with the cartels. They have, and they have spoken with them about this, because if she were in Mexico, especially if she were in the Nogales area, the new generation cartel's very active there. Um, they would know.
Well,
Nothing goes on in cartel territory that they don't know about. And I'm not saying, I don't believe at all that this had anything to do with the cartels. I'm just saying they would know about it. And the Mexican federal police have been speaking with them about it, because nothing happens in an area they dominate that they don't know about.
because I would wonder too, like just on the, because I initially had that thought, just as kind of the, non law enforcement person, just kind of watching this case and seeing how close it is to the border. And you're like, is this a cartel thing? But then you think about it, it's like, if you're in the business of drugs, like the last thing you would want to do is bring this type of attention on yourself, right? Is that like a fair
Right.
way to thinking of like
$4 and
taking
$6
an
million
84-year-old
to
woman?
the cartel, that's literally pocket change. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not a people talk all the time about the kidnappings that are cartel related in Mexico, but those have as much to do with politics as they have to do with, that's not a real money making part of their business. They may kidnap a member of a family of someone who's trying to prosecute them, or of a politician that they want him to do certain things, just to teach them a lesson. So the cartels have not been coming into the United States and kidnapping prominent figures for $4 and $6 million. That's again, that's insignificant amount of money to them, and they don't want that kind of attention. They're already
Right.
getting much more attention under the current administration than they want. So to do something like this would make no sense.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah, it's something I think for a lot of us just on the outside, when you see, you just think of the border and certainly some of the activity in Mexico, but, to your point, it just doesn't seem to make sense on that sense. A lot of questions unanswered now. Entering the third week of this case, you still hope that there's a happy ending here in some ways. Greg Rogers, retired FBI special agent. Great to have you on Law&Crime. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks.
If you have information on Nancy Guthrie, contact the Pima County Sheriff. Their number 520-351-4900. And you can also contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to tips.fbi.gov. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we are also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.